Prior to the experience, I had ordered a small, hanging stained glass window with a wisdom quotation on it for my godchild. When it came, it was a pure white statuette of Saint Francis Assisi. Puzzled with this, I phoned the company I bought it from and explained the error. They were flummoxed because my item and order number had nothing in common with the item they sent me. They felt it was auspicious and chose to send me the window hanging, insisting that I keep the statuette. They strongly felt that a greater God reason was at play and that I must have had a need to be in touch with Saint Francis. Okay, I thought, and gratefully accepted this most unexpected gift and turn of events. I cleared a space around my favorite chair in the living room and daily pondered the significance of this gift. I'd ask St. Francis, "Why are you here? What am I to do or learn? Do you have a message for me?" It had to be around late March or early April. I remember having to pull out my long wool coat due to a big temperature drop on the morning of the event. I got dressed for work with my T-strapped heels, dress, and winter coat. I had recently purchased a yellow Ford cargo-type van with tinted windows all around. It was an automatic with a big Canadian V8 engine with lots of pulling power. I was still adjusting to its unique blind spots and the challenges of driving such a big vehicle with side mirrors. I used to drive a Ford Pinto, so this change was very intimidating. This van was a slim fit into a fourplex garage that had brick separator between the parking spaces for each tenant. While the interior was shared, we each had our own garage door. My parking spot was at the far end of the garage with a brick wall to the right and a brick separator between the parking spaces to the left. This was the experience. On this morning, as I was backing out of the garage, I was about 3/4 of the way out when I realized my angle was wrong. I didn't want to scrape the paint on the van, so I put the van in park, opened the door, and jumped out. I walked to the back of the van to see if I needed to straighten it out or not. As I returned to the driver's side door and opened it to get in, the van suddenly jumped gears and was moving forward into the garage. I tried to jump up into the van, but the door was slamming shut faster than I could jump up and in, so I retreated from that, my heart pounding from the close call. I foolishly leaned against the van to collect myself. Then I realized that I was being dragged along by the van and into that tiny space between the brick separator and the van. I tried to pull myself out of that sudden squeeze to the outside of the building, but I was already pulled in too tightly and my efforts to free myself were not working. I screamed for help. I knew I was dying. My consciousness changed from a person angry with my dad, life's problems, and myself, to my spirit self, determined to not take this rage over to the other side. I felt my love emerge and forgive everything. Then I realized that I know this drill, done it thousands of times. I exited the body through that soft spot, the same place as in a baby's head. I was happy, joyous, and free. I reveled in being free from the restrictive constrictions imposed by a physical form, matter, and gravity. It felt like a sigh of relief, much like someone removing a very tight girdle. Then I turned my attention to the scene below me. The old man from next door was gasping. I saw my smashed body between the van and brick separator. I also saw all the people gathering from around the neighborhood. My love and care turned towards my family and the impact my death would have on them. I could feel their impending shock, regrets, and sorrow. Then I turned my attention heavenward home. And right there was Kuthumi, also known as St. Francis of Assisi. He showed himself in his eternal presence as a clear, light vignette in a human form and surrounded by cherubs. I recognized him as my teacher mentor. There is no time and space, nor words for that matter, like we relate to in 3D life. I experienced volumes of information and communication freely exchanged without any confusion or interpretation issues. It is a profoundly beautiful thing. light and love in communion with each other. I can only give a synopsis of this exchange, and it varies a bit each time I share it because that is just the way it is. I was being recalled by my Christos spirit presence in order to review a dire situation that was interfering with my life path, and I needed to get things back in order and on track. Thus, this death was like a safety valve recall. I needed to wake my conscious mind up to the slippery backslide that was neither karmically induced nor required for my soul. I needed the higher guidance so I could determine if I wanted this situation to progress or to end. I understood this path was not merely sidetracking and distracting me. I needed to understand the consequences of my actions were leading me down a path that I had not previously chosen. I had to deal with my alcohol addiction. My personal self was having too many sessions of drinking until I went unconscious. I didn't have the control I believed myself to have. I had to stop drinking or going numb by other means. This was non-negotiable, and I knew why. I wholeheartedly agreed to. I was offered a choice to return immediately to my current life and re-enter my body, joining the scene below, or I could be born as an infant into another family as soon as possible to have my lifetime start over. Without hesitation, I chose to experience a miracle with no broken bones. Although there was physical body memory and muscle displacement, the medical doctors were baffled and dismissive of what really happened to me. From presence and the self-gnosis thereof, the very idea of starting over with parents who would be searching for truth through consensus religions and such ideas was not attractive to me. I hope this doesn't sound self-righteous, judgmental, arrogant, or special because that kind of energy does not exist in light and love. My decision to come back has nothing to do with our eternal nature of divine origin. I'm candidly sharing my reflections about a rare opportunity of having the clarity of knowing I'd be going back to guessing, wishing, hoping, wondering, despairing to know for sure if I chose the option to be born again. That would mean my future and soon-to-be parents could only be guiding and teaching me their belief systems, and I'd be tethered as a child to what would be essentially another scenario of what I considered as the blind leading the blind all over again. My choice means I don't need to start all over again. I have the gift of the conscious awareness of being a spirit in a human body. I have this amazing discovery as my spiritual guide rail. Now, I wouldn't believe I was one with the Creator. I would remember this experience. As soon as this decision was made, I was back in my earthly body. The van rolled off and hit the back wall. People were surrounding me, peeling me off the brick separator and holding me up. They were attempting to get the shoes off so I could stand. An ambulance was on the way. The inside of my coat was shredded, the steel shank in my shoes was bent in half, and I was a smelly mess after the experience. When I returned to my body, there was this man who no one seemed to know. He claimed to be a neighbor from about 4 units down. He wore a cap-like hat and stood in front of me at the garage wall with his arms outstretched around me like we were in a huddle. He reviewed my agreements I made with Kuthumi, the choice I made, and told me I'd have to go to the hospital, so don't fight it. I was so amazed, I invited him up for tea so we could delve into this more. He said at a later time when I got back, but I never saw him again. I was talking about miracles and saying that I wanted to go up to my apartment for a good sleep. The paramedics put me on a board and took me to the hospital, expecting me to start bleeding. That didn't happen. After the experience, when I returned to my body, there was this man who no one seemed to know. He claimed to be a neighbor from about 4 units down. He wore a cap-like hat and stood in front of me at the garage wall with his arms outstretched around me like we were in a huddle. He reviewed my agreements I made with Kuthumi, the choice I made, and told me I'd have to go to the hospital, so don't fight it. I was so amazed. I invited him up for tea so we could delve into this more. He said at a later time when I got back, but I never saw him again. I was talking about miracles and saying that I wanted to go up to my apartment for a good sleep. The paramedics put me on a board and took me to the hospital, expecting me to start bleeding. That didn't happen. I was the happiest, almost dead person, the paramedic sitting with me in the back proclaimed. At the hospital, full-body x-rays were taken and other tests were done. I was there for the rest of the day with the paramedic checking in on me each time they came back to the hospital. We had some interesting talks because he was dumbfounded at how well I was considering what had happened. I was finally released to my protective neighbor, Ike, that we both pretended was my dad. I was pretty weak from all my fluids being released. After drinking a glass of orange juice that I had to insist be delivered got me, I was able to stand and walk out with Ike's help. This story was shared by Sharon Q and happened in March or April in the mid-1970s.